Welcome to Soul Sparks with Saima. Here we dive into real conversations that challenge the norms and ignite self-awareness. And today we are exploring the link between mental health and alcohol, a topic that's often poured over but rarely unpacked. And joining us is our amazing guest, Michelle Hosted, founder and visionary behind To Be Honest Beverage Company, a brand redefining what it means to drink consciously. She's here to share how mindful consumption, purpose, and self-trust can reshape our relationship with alcohol and with ourselves. So, Michelle, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Oh, it's my pleasure to have you here, and I'm really looking forward to making this a meaningful experience for you. So, Michelle, can you share that what inspired you to start To Be Honest Beverage Company and reimagine drinking culture from the inside out?
Well, I stopped drinking about 3.5 years ago, and I grew up drinking. Alcohol was a big part of the experience, being a young person, being with my family around the holidays, celebrations, events, activities, daytime, nighttime. And as I got into the professional world, networking and parties, holiday parties, coworkers, it just kind of permeated life. My husband and partner had co-founded a brewery and now is partner and head of manufacturing for a hard cider company as well. And so over time, alcohol just became such a norm and really was to the point where it wasn't if I wanted to drink alcohol, it was just when and what. And so it just felt like it was a habit, it was a go-to. And instead of being something that I actively chose, it was something that was always around, always available, always flowing. And with that culture, it's not negative in all the ways, but can have negative impacts. And the way that I was starting to experience that was struggling with anxiety attacks. And I can't say that alcohol was the root cause of those anxiety attacks, but it exacerbated the issue. Alcohol is a depressant. It affects your mind, it affects your body, it affects your state of being. In the days to follow drinking, I did not feel so great about myself. So contributing to lethargy, lack of motivation, not kind of wanting to get up and get through the day. And so I just decided to pause. And with that pause, one day became two, and then week and weeks and months. And now it's 3.5 years later, and I just don't really have any desire to go back to alcohol. And so a healthy time after I had stopped drinking and during the time when I was transitioning, it was the question of, okay, well, what do I do instead? What do I drink instead? And because my husband has been in beverage production, we started sampling, trying, tasting, experimenting, getting a lot of different options, but nothing really fit the bill for what we were looking for, flavor, function, and experience. That really created like a well-crafted cocktail, which is what I felt like I missed most about alcohol consumption. And so that's where the business came from. That's why To Be Honest Bev was founded. And as I started to kind of grow into it, I found stories that were more along the lines of, I feel like I'm missing out. I don't feel included. What do I drink when I go to this? Or I'm having people over. And so for a long time, people were kind of put on the back burner if they weren't drinking, and that's what we're essentially trying to change.
That's really a great perspective, Michelle, and I really appreciate that how you describe turning that insight into a vision that challenges conventional drinking culture. And it's really inspiring to hear how your approach isn't just about creating a product, I would say, but about reshaping the way people relate to drinking on a deeper, more intentional level. Now, speaking of that, you often talk about the emotional link between alcohol and mental health. So how do you see drinking culture, impacting our emotional well-being?
Well, there's absolutely something to be said about as you're drinking, it changes, it's an intoxicant. So that means it affects your consciousness. So, I'm not a biologist, I'm not a physiologist, but as a depressant, it automatically will affect your mood. And then it affecting your consciousness and mental state of being, everybody reacts a little bit differently. But if you've been around people who are drinking, the energy changes, the language changes, inhibitions change. And so I believe people are impacted just from drinking alone. So there's that aspect of it is right. The act of consuming and the intoxication that happens to follow. And that can impact your relationships. It impacts the choices that you make. It impacts how you navigate and go about that time, which is, I think, having more of an effect on people than they realize, even if they maybe don't remember it, or I just had one or two. It changes the choices we make. It changes the way we spend our time. It changes how we interact with other people. And so I think that in and of itself is kind of an emotional impact. Not to mention, if you are choosing alcohol, which is kind of where I was at, I was choosing alcohol to cope, to numb, and to avoid. And so it was easier to use as a distraction than actually addressing and dealing with the underlying or more root cause of what I feel like was anxiety and challenges with life at the time, not dealing with either past trauma or going to therapy and having healthy conversations, dialogues, and ways to navigate that, but using alcohol as a tool. And then in the days to follow, the way that it affects your neurology and your brain is just kind of like going off the deep end a little bit. It's like you're sluggish, brain fog, lack of clarity, certain sense of like insecurities and doubts or not feeling good about yourself. Maybe you're not happy with the choices you made or how you presented yourself. All of that can kind of be like a little bit of a spiral that happens in the days to follow. So that is, I think, a lot of ways in terms of it impacting your mental, emotional health, not only from a science perspective, but also just the way that we operate in the world and how we're engaging, and then the narrative that we have in our minds. So the way that we're reflecting, did I say that? Did I reach out to this person? Oh my gosh, I can't believe I made that choice. There's a lot of doubt, insecurity, and mindset reframes that happen because of that.
Absolutely, Michelle. That's such a thoughtful way to put it, I would say. And I really admire how clearly you articulate the broader impact of drinking culture, not just on the individual, but on the relationships and the choices we make every day. Like you explained, it's such a valuable perspective and really makes me appreciate the depth of work you are doing to shift how we think about alcohol and well-being.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's important because drinking is so much a part of every culture, whether it is alcohol or anything else, whether that's tea or coffee, juices. Like there are all different things that we consume that are beverages that are not going away. They take important ritual to practice. There are different ways in which we engage, again, via celebrations. They mark certain moments. They could be morning, noon, and night in different ways. And so really what we're trying to do is reframe what it means to consume, and beverage is just the medium.
Absolutely, I completely agree with that. Now, building on that, I'm really curious to know that, do you think that people are using alcohol for like more for connection or for escape today?
Well, I think that with 8 billion people on the planet and lots of those who consume alcohol, it's hard to say that it's hard to say there's one motivation, right? We have different ways in which we engage with the world, and therefore there are different reasons for drinking. I do think that the social aspect of drinking is very, very important. And that's a big part of the culture side of it, is that oftentimes you're coming together with other people and alcohol is a part of that, whether it's the main reason or it's an adjacent reason, or it just happens to be there because of the thing that you're doing. So the social side of it, I think, is a huge motivator in why people drink. However, you can have a similar or as just an enjoyable or even better experience if you're not consuming alcohol. So I think once people start to realize that, is that you can have something else and still celebrate and still play and still have a great time and still adventure and still connect and build relationships. And if not, differently, it's just even more intensely, right? Because when you're not drinking alcohol, you tend to be more present, you're aware, you're cognizant, and so you're connecting with people at a very different level. So I feel like the social experience is only enhanced when you're not consuming alcohol. But I think people drink for a lot of different reasons, whether that's to forget, to numb, to avoid, to distract, to enjoy. There's a lot of culture heritage when it comes to drinking, whether that's spirits or wine or even beer. So there's an appreciation, there's a flavor, there's a palate, there's different styles. And so I think people drink for that reason and that motivation. And the intoxication isn't necessarily the main goal. And then people drink out of habit. It's just a ritual. It's a turn off from the workday to your evening time. It's when you get together with a certain type of group. It's because you, again, are doing something in your day that triggers that thing. So I'd have to say that it just depends on the person and the circumstance, and we all have different motivations for drinking or not drinking alcohol.
That makes a lot of sense, Michelle. And I love that you acknowledge the complexity. It really highlights that people's relationship with alcohol isn't like one-dimensional. There are so many factors at play, yes. Now, speaking of navigating complexity, like building a purpose-driven brand in the space can be easy, for sure. So how do you keep your vision authentic amid industry pressure?
So we're really small, and we're not like a backed and funded traditional CPG brand. So I think that's one of the ways we're able to maintain integrity with how we present as a brand, especially in the online space. How people are seeing us from a content perspective, from a voice perspective, from a messaging perspective. And then the other piece of it is like, it's just something that I truly believe in. And as a founder, as someone creating a company, you essentially are choosing and cultivating values. And those values have to align with who you are as an individual. Otherwise, as you grow or as you move forward, there's always going to be some sort of disconnect or rift or issue. And so I try to be really intentional in getting started as like, what are our core values and what are we focused on? And what do I truly believe in as an individual? And what do I want to see in the world? Because businesses are, a medium of exchange to make profit, have money, but ultimately to provide something to the world, to create, to cultivate, to have something that wasn't there before. And for us, and where we want to see in change happening, across the globe, but of course, just starting here in the US, is that shift in drinking culture, which is rooted in intentionality, mindfulness, the way that we see ourselves, being honest with ourselves, creating authenticity, and ultimately choice is governing your life with choice. And that comes down to your time, your priorities, the way in which you invest with resources, people you surround yourself, your environment, your choice of work, all of those things. And drinking, again, is a small part of that, but it's at the crux of a lot of the things that we do. And so if we can bring more mindfulness into that aspect into our life, the goal is to ripple effect into the others. And so with that belief system, with that vision, with that purpose, it's just kind of natural to want to embed it into the brand, because the brand is just a creative representation of our values, of how I'm feeling, of what I'm thinking. And we just try to do the best that we can. Now, we're not the type of brand that's like gone viral and had that epic success just yet. I think that, hopefully will be on the horizon in the next couple years. But for me, it's about just trying to maintain the integrity of what I truly believe and the change that I want to see in the world, and then reflecting that back in the business and brand.
That's really impressive, Michelle. And I love how you have found a way to stay grounded and true to your values, like you said, even in a space that can be, so fast moving and pressure filled. It's really inspiring to see someone to see you, in fact, lead with such clarity and integrity. It really shows in everything you are building with To Be Honest Beverage Company.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that I'm very lucky because we're still on the very small scale. We're kind of more like a local mom and pop business. We're working on our direct-to-consumer model first, and there are a lot of opportunities to go the grocery retail route, but we are not choosing that from the beginning for a reason. It's just a choice. And, it means we don't have to chase investment. It means we don't have to try to figure out how to get into 300 stores at a time. And we can take a different approach. So it's just a different business model. It's just a different intention. And so, hopefully it'll pay out in the end. It means we're a lot smaller up front, but that's okay with me. I want to invest in the length of being here. What are we going to be in 10 years as opposed to just what are we needing to do in the next year to maintain,
And I truly wish and pray that you all the best and, you keep moving forward.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, that's what we're going to continue to do. I always believe that you never fail if you don't give up. You just keep moving forward, and maybe it's a pivot, maybe it's a shift, maybe it's a change, maybe it's not the original business that you thought. But if you continue to do, if you continue to try, if you continue to put yourself out there and show up, like you're not failing. You're just learning as you grow, because that's what we're all out here to do from a life and experience perspective. Is we're here to try, to do, to have something that doesn't work out and then move forward and do something else. And maybe that works out, maybe it doesn't. It's not really about, I worked towards this one goal and accolade. Now I've reached it and then I'm done. It's just a perpetual process of growth and learning and figuring it out and just trying to, it's no one's perfect, and I definitely mess up a lot, but it's just kind of trying to find that alignment and purpose within yourself to continue to show up in integrity.
Oh, that's a powerful perspective. Yes, I completely agree with that. Now, for listeners struggling with the mental tug of war between, wanting change and fearing it, what's your message for them?
So I am someone who grew up with a lot of change. We moved around a lot. I do think that the experience that you've had up until this point will impact the way that you view change, because some people embrace it wholeheartedly and some people are nervous or afraid of experiencing it. I'm the kind of person who's not typically okay with what I would call like the status quo, the day-to-day, the everything stable and good. I want change, I want adventure, I want growth, and I crave that. So it's difficult for me to say, because I'm like, take the leap, jump off the bridge, do the thing. Like, well, not jump off, you know what I mean? Just give it a go. And not necessarily always worry about the consequences. But for some people, change can be really scary, because maybe you've built your priorities around stability and safety and security. And so I think the important thing for them to do through that time is understanding, like, what about the change is creating that fear? What about it is scary? And how can you prioritize some type of alignment in values with the change that you're seeking? So if one of your core values, for example, is connection, but you are at a place in your life where you haven't made any new friends in a while, the change in location or activity that you might have to do in order to branch out and make new friends is what could be a little bit scary, or you could have that fear about that particular change. But if you root it back down to, okay, I'm looking to build connection, and if I do this thing, then I will find connection, and that's what's important to me. So is connection more important? Does it carry more weight? Does it have more value to me than the fear that I'm feeling? And then the other thing too is, I think that with shame and with embarrassment and with fear and guilt and all of those kind of what you would term like negative emotions, a lot of times it's because we're not bringing them to the light. And so when you can either talk about them, when you can write about them, when you can share them in some way, if you're an artist, to draw them, bring them to the forefront and address them, say them out loud, say them in your head, and actually get it out. And once you do, I feel like fear is minimized, because oftentimes we catastrophize in our minds. We don't actually address like what's happening. So yeah, that's what I would say about that.
That's really a meaningful point, Bashir. And I love how you acknowledge that inner struggle between wanting change and feeling fear. It's something like so many people silently face. And your message really makes that tension feel understandable and less overwhelming, I would say. Now, with that in mind, what's one practical approach someone could take to start moving forward, even when, fear feels so present?
Is So for a while before moving into our business, I did fitness coaching and teaching. And so I spent many years teaching yoga, bar, functional fitness, personal training. And then I transitioned into health coaching and worked in like behavior change. So getting people to essentially start things that they hadn't done before or that they hadn't done in a long time. And so there was a lot of fear around that, the health component of our lives, fitness, nutrition, sleep, etc. Now, from a professional perspective, if you're like looking to make a job change or something like that, or a life perspective, maybe you need to move, maybe you are not with the right partner. There's a lot of different aspects of our lives in which we could initiate and make change. But as an overarching approach, I think we really need to practically start with an assessment of what it is. A lot of us want things without really realizing where we are in order to get there. And I like using everyone says you can't go anywhere if you don't know the destination. Well, technically in GPS, you actually can't go anywhere if you don't have a starting location either. You're just looking up a destination, a point on the map. But whether you're coming from France, or whether you're coming from Australia, or whether you're coming from India, or whether you're coming from the US, that's really going to change how you're going to get there. And so when people are trying to make change, they often leap ahead into what they're doing. So let's just say someone wants to start a fitness routine, and that's the change they want to make in their life. Well, they're going to say, okay, I'm going to go sign up for a gym and I'm going to work out 5 days a week. And as most people taper off with any of those goals, you realize that that was an unrealistic place for them to start because they had no idea where they were even starting from. They never took an assessment of like what it is right now that they are doing and then what it is realistically that they're able to do in the steps to make change. Kind of about layers and adding on layers. Not many people can just 180, snap a finger and make a huge life adjustment. Some people can, and that works for them. But for most of us, we need to kind of approach things incrementally and think about where are we now? What is the circumstance? Where do we want to go? What's the ultimate plan for that? But baby steps, starting from ground zero, how do we actually get there? And when you start to break it down too, it's like, okay, I'm going to move across the country. That sounds really, really scary. And that type of change feels really daunting. But if we say, okay, I'm based out of Los Angeles and I have a condo here. I have to sell a condo. I've got to pack up the house. I've got to do these things. And you start kind of breaking it down and even get smaller and smaller and smaller. Like I've got to find a place here. Okay, I want to live in this location. And when you start doing that from a plan and a strategy perspective, before you do anything, before you make any execution or moves, you start to realize, okay, this is manageable. Okay, I can do this. Okay, don't worry about doing everything at once. Let me just focus on this one thing. So I think that is the helpful aspect of starting to reduce and minimize the fear, is figuring out where you are, not just where you want to go, but what are the steps it's going to take to get you there, and then just doing one thing at a time.
I really love how you explain that, Samantha. And the way you break it down makes taking those first steps feel approachable and realistic, even when the fear is really strong. And I admire how you combine practical advice with such warmth and understanding. It's the kind of guidance that truly resonates.
Well, thank you so much.
Now, thinking of that, the next phase, how can someone keep that forward momentum and stay committed when old habits or self-doubt start to surface?
This is where I think it's really important to come back to the alignment, the integrity of what it is that you want in the world. Lots of us set goals for ourselves and actually do a lot of things in our lives, not because we truly want them or they align with our own values, but because it's meeting an expectation, an external pressure, whether that's societal, familial, your partner or spouse, friends, culture, society, expectations set by the media in terms of how you should look, feel, appear. And we, without thinking and kind of blindly, tend to follow those things. So we get a certain job because we want to look a certain way. We spend certain amounts of money on things for us to dress a certain way. Fitness, sometimes we do that for other people. And so when you start to get into what you would say is like consistency or maintenance phase of behavior change, you may be sliding back to past habits for lots of different reasons. It could be trauma-based. It could be your environment. It could be where your mental space is at. It could be the fact that you're not getting enough sleep and therefore you're stressed. And so emotionally, you're not handling it very well. It could be mental health. It could be a lot of different reasons. But part of that is kind of returning back to, why am I doing this? What is the underlying value that I'm supporting in my life? Is this aligned with what I want for myself right now and in the future? Am I doing this for somebody else, for something else? Or am I doing it just for me because I want it and I choose it? Because the technicalities of making change and doing the change are really honestly very simple. Like if you break it down, it's like you block the time for it, you sign up for it, you do the thing, it just execute it. It's like if you looked at it on paper, it's very simple, very approachable. But a lot of people get in their heads, and that's where the damage is done, because we're cycling through questions and insecurities and doubts and no, I can't do this. Or you have those feelings of shame, embarrassment, guilt. I'm supposed to go to the gym 5 times a week, but I only went 3 times this week. I can't believe that. I'm such a failure. And it sounds dramatic whenever you kind of talk about it and say it out loud, but because we have this internal narrative going 24/7, so many of those thoughts are either on repeat or negative. We don't realize the language that we're using with ourselves, and that's oftentimes why people can get off track. They're derailing themselves, or it's because that thing wasn't in alignment anymore. And if you actually went back to the drawing board and went back to your assessment, you'd say, oh, I don't have to work out 5 times a week. That isn't aligned with my goals. It isn't aligned with who I am as a person. And I would rather be doing this instead. So when you start to like channel your energy in what makes sense for you, independent of what anybody else says, wants, expects of you, then that's maintenance. And that's when you're figuring out what in your life makes you happy, is sustainable, and you're doing it because it brings you joy and a level of excitement, hope, validation. It's something that you actually enjoy, love, and want to be doing, as opposed to, oh, I just have to make this change. I have to put my head down and I just have to get through this.
That's a noteworthy perspective, Michelle. And the way you bring it back to intention and self-reflection is really powerful. It reminds us, that momentum isn't just about pushing forward blindly, but about staying connected to our own reasons and values. And it's such a grounding and honest way to navigate those moments of doubt. So, Michelle, you had showed us that the future of drinking is about choice. And to everyone listening, maybe it's time to ask why and what you are drinking, but why? Because clarity, confidence, and calm are the real spirits worth raising a glass to. So stay curious, stay conscious, and keep your soul spark.